What's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Wednesday morning, talking tonight's 9-game slate around the association. Before we hop into the games, your quick reminder, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below. That way you will get notified whenever I post a new video, and those likes go a long way to my videos finding themselves into the hands of people that are not currently subscribers. If you're not already subscribed to my daily content projections, Discord, and all that good stuff, you have a couple options available to you. You can head over to my Patreon page, patreon.com/BrentHyden. Take advantage of the 2 monthly packages that I have available over there. Or you can head over to the Twitter machine, follow me over there, my Twitter handle @BrentHyden1 in the description down below. While you're doing that, you can send me a direct message to find out how you can get access for a very affordable one-time price that carries you all the way through the playoffs. But without further ado, let's head into the games. The first game of the night that we're going to talk about, Atlanta at Washington. Washington 4.5-point favorites in this one, 229.5 over under. This is going to be chalk city as far as ownership goes, but for a good reason. John Wall obviously is out. Dwight Howard is out. Otto Porter expected to suit up in this one. Markieff Morris is out. Taurean Prince is out. Kent Bazemore is out. And Dwayne Dedmon is questionable for this game. Have a couple guys that I want to hit on right before we get into the analysis. John Collins has recorded 6 straight double-doubles after having 22 points and 16 rebounds against Indiana. And Kevin Huerter notched the season best 22 points and 6 3-pointers against Indiana for his 12th double-digit outing of the season. Obviously, the return of Otto Porter is going to muck things up for the Washington rotation a little bit, but that does not mean we have to overlook several of these options, and that starts with Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal coming in at 8,600 over on DraftKings. Bradley Beal is a little bit more expensive over on FanDuel, where he comes in at 9,800. Don't expect him to be as popular over there, but I still absolutely love Bradley Beal in this spot tonight. Bradley Beal, averages 1.43 fantasy points per minute with a 34.2% usage rate whenever you take Wall, Morris, Dwight, Oubre, and Rivers all off the floor. This is a really, really good spot for him. Atlanta ranks 27th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards this season, allowing him to shoot almost 38% from 3 and 45% from the floor. I realize he is priced kind of close to his ceiling over on FanDuel. If you're playing in tournaments, obviously you can take a look at some other really high upside, more affordable options, but especially in cash, you're going to be getting like 38, 40 minutes out of Bradley Beal and a high usage, great matchup. Absolutely no reason to fade him in cash, and especially on DraftKings at 8,600, where he should be able to get you upper 40s, maybe even top 50, which he's actually averaging 54.5 in 2 games against Washington or against Atlanta already this season. Tomas Satoransky priced at 4,600 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel. Another ceiling price on FanDuel, actually may not even end up being a very good play over on FanDuel. You're still getting a fairly affordable guy playing a lot of minutes, again, in a very, very, very good matchup. Tomas Satoransky doesn't have really, really high usage numbers, averaging just 0.75 fantasy points per minute without Wall and all these other people off the floor. But at 4,600 on DraftKings, no reason to not have a decent amount of exposure to him. Atlanta 29th in defensive efficiency to point guards this season. The rest of the team, Trevor Ariza, not very high upside option, coming in at 5,900 on DraftKings, 6,600 on FanDuel. Still projects for about 30 fantasy points across both sites. Trevor Ariza, again, 5,900 on DraftKings, a really strong cash option just because he's going to play a ton of minutes. Even with Otto Porter coming back, Trevor Ariza is still going to play 38 minutes most likely. Still just a really, really strong cash option. I don't really have interest in Otto Porter. I do expect him to play limited minutes. I currently have him projected at 27. If you wanted to take a shot on him on DraftKings, you can. Obviously, it is a good spot against Atlanta. That being said, you can still go back to the well at Jeff Green. I currently have him getting minutes behind Thomas Bryant as a small ball center, as well as all the minutes behind Otto Porter, Jeff Green. Coming in at 4,400 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. Still a pretty strong value option here in this spot tonight. And then Thomas Bryant, someone that we absolutely have to talk about here. Thomas Bryant, 4,700 on DraftKings. He is over 6K over on FanDuel. He is 6,600 over there. Not as good of a play over there, but in the last 2 games without Markieff Morris, has topped 30 minutes in both. It is a really, really, really good spot for Thomas Bryant. He does average 1.19 fantasy points per minute whenever you take all these guys off the floor. Atlanta giving up 46 rebounds per game, 15 second chance points. It's a pretty good spot here for Thomas Bryant. I have a lot of interest in him. So just to recap, Bradley Beal, Satoransky, Bryant, the three top options for me. Green and Ariza, guys that you can consider in cash and things like that. On the Washington side, or on the Atlanta side of things, with Prince and Bazemore being out and also Dwayne Dedmon being questionable, we definitely want to monitor the news. Daniel Hamilton got the start against Indiana. Only played 16 minutes in that game, but actually looked really, really good. 4 of 8 from the floor, put up 20 fantasy points. If you're playing on FanDuel, I'm perfectly fine with Daniel Hamilton as one of your FanDuel drop options. He's 3,600 over there. It's obviously a decent matchup against a bad Washington defense. But guys like John Collins, who's been just an absolute monster, has notched 10, 40-plus fantasy point games. He's only played 20 games this season. Washington ranks 29th in defense efficiency to power forwards, giving up 22 points, 12.6 rebounds to the position. John Collins, 8,200 on DraftKings, 8,400 on FanDuel. A very, very, very strong option. He should have absolutely no issue putting up a monster outing here tonight. Trae Young is interesting here. Obviously, Washington does struggle against point guards on the season, and Trae Young actually been a little bit better recently. He has been inconsistent for the majority of the season. He hasn't been able to produce too well in the two matchups against Washington already, just averaging 27.6 fantasy points in just under 30 minutes. That being said, again, he has been shooting the ball a little bit better recently, connecting on 48.4% of his shots, 50% from three. And I like him a decent amount here. He owns a 33.7% usage rate whenever you take Prince and Bazemore off the floor, averaging 1.19 fantasy points per minute. Trae Young, 6,500 on DraftKings, 7,100 on FanDuel. A very, very strong tournament option here. I still really like Kevin Huerter, who should see 30 minutes once again in a really good spot. Washington allowing 37% on three-point shooting. 53% of Kevin Huerter's shots are from beyond the arc. Kevin Huerter coming in at 4,400 on DraftKings, and he is 4,600 on FanDuel. A very, very strong value in this spot. Has topped 30 minutes and 20 fantasy points averages against Washington already this season. Jeremy Lin, one of my favorite value options on the entire slate. Jeremy Lin coming in at 3,900 on DraftKings, and he is 4,600 on FanDuel. Does project for a decent amount of minutes in this spot. I have some interest in Jeremy Lin here tonight, especially with Atlanta being really, really short-handed at guard. Outside of that, you can look at Dwayne Dedmon, who has been playing really well recently, averaging 37.6 fantasy points in 28 minutes. It is a good matchup here for Dwayne Dedmon at 5,800 on DraftKings and 6,500 on FanDuel if he's able to suit up. Alex Len would be someone to consider if Dwayne Dedmon is not able to go in this game. Alex Len, 4,700 on DraftKings and 5,200 on FanDuel, coming off two decent outings without Dwayne Dedmon. He'd be a value option to consider. And then Vince Carter, someone that you can also look at, especially on FanDuel. Vince Carter at 3,500 on DraftKings would be a name to keep in mind. He is 3,600 on FanDuel. Moving on, Miami at Cleveland. Miami 5.5 point favorites in this game, 204 over under. Lots of injury news to talk about in this one. Dion Waiters is questionable. James Johnson is probable. David Nwaba is out. Ante Zizic is out. Patrick McCaw is probable. Tristan Thompson is questionable. Rodney Hood is questionable. And Kevin Love is out. I'm just going to knock the Cleveland side out really, really quickly because I don't really have any interest in Cleveland. There's really not anyone that jumps off the page as a strong option, especially if Tristan Thompson is going to return. And with Patrick McCaw coming potentially into the rotation, that's going to screw things up more. We do have David Nwaba out, but we still have Rodney Hood who could suit up. If Hood is actually out, then Alec Burks and Jordan Clarkson would be GPP guys to consider. Both are still somewhat affordable, especially Alec Burks. Alec Burks coming in at 4,800 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel. But again, there's just so many bodies there now. Like, if Rodney Hood plays, you have Alec Burks, you have Rodney Hood, you have Dellavedova, you have Patrick McCaw there now, you have Sexton, you have Clarkson, you still have Jerron Blossom Game, you still have Chetty Osman, you still have just so many bodies. There's just no reason, especially in a not very good matchup, to even really try to force exposure to this unless things open up a little bit. If Tristan Thompson is out, you can go back to the well with Larry Nance, who averages like 1.12 fantasy points per minute whenever you take him off the floor. But Larry Nance at 7,600, not terribly appealing in this spot. I mean, it's not the greatest of matchups against Miami. So again, it's a pretty unappealing spot here for Cleveland. The Miami side is a little bit more appealing. Obviously, we do need to monitor the news for the status of Dion Waiters, but Justice Winslow obviously recently promoted the starting point guard role. Cleveland ranks 30th in defensive efficiency to point guards this season. Winslow has been solid recently, coming off a really strong stretch of games here. Even in a tough matchup against Minnesota and a tough matchup against Toronto, has been really good over the last 5 games, averaging 37.4 fantasy points, 17 points, 4.8 assists, 6.4 rebounds. We like to target Justice Winslow in matchups where opponents lack rim protection, and that is the case here with Cleveland. Cleveland allowing opponents to shoot 67.5% at the rim. Justice Winslow taking 33% of his shots at the rim. This is a really good spot here for Justice Winslow. I have a decent amount of interest in him tonight. Obviously, the elevated price tag is a little concerning, but it's still a solid spot for him here. Dwayne Wade, obviously interesting at his price, 4,700 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. You know, revenge game for Dwayne Wade, but also just a really, really high usage guy off the bench. It's a strong matchup here for him. I have a lot of interest. He's still only going to play in the mid-20s in minutes, but he's going to take double-digit shots when he's out there. And again, Cleveland, not a very good defense. It's a really good spot here for Dwayne Wade. 28.9% usage rate off the bench, so he's fine, especially as a cash game value. Josh Richardson, fine in all formats. Doesn't really jump off the page as a good matchup for him. So, yeah, it's just Josh Richardson. We saw Hassan Whiteside 30 minutes against Toronto, 28 against Minnesota, 28 against Orlando, playing limited minutes most nights just because it's Hassan Whiteside. He'd be a tournament option only. James Johnson, intriguing here. Johnson has been playing significantly better. In the breakdown, I noted what he's been doing over the last 2 games. I obviously omitted the 8 minutes against Cleveland last time out, but 23 minutes per game, 20 fantasy points over that span. Really, really solid spot here for him. Cleveland allowing opposing power forwards to light them up. 23.6 points, 10 rebounds, 52% field goal percentage, and 41% from 3. Again, James Johnson, very, very intriguing here. 3,900 on DraftKings and 5,100 on FanDuel. Kelly Olynyk can be used in GPPs, along with Bam Adebayo. We actually saw in this last matchup against Cleveland, Bam Adebayo get 30 minutes. If Tristan Thompson is indeed out for this game, Bam Adebayo would be a very, very strong tournament option here tonight. Moving on, Dallas at Charlotte. We do have Jeremy Lamb and Cody Zeller out for this game. Charlotte, 2.5-point favorites in this one. 222.5 over under. Looking at the Dallas side of things first, Luka Doncic coming off what people are probably going to say is a down game, but I don't think people are going to realize he only played 22 minutes in that game. He still put up 30 fantasy points. Did snap his streak of 4 straight games with at least 21 points in that one. Again, he only played limited minutes, so let's give the guy a little bit of a break here. I have a lot of interest in some of the Dallas options here tonight. Mavericks obviously back to full strength, so that does hurt the upside of some of these guys a little bit. But Dennis Smith, very, very interesting mid-range option here. Dennis Smith Jr. Coming in at 4,800 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. Charlotte ranks 19th in defensive efficiency to point guards on the season. But it's worth noting their rim protection number is going to take a hit with Cody Zeller being out. Dennis Smith Jr. takes 41% of his shots at the rim. He's best served, I think, for tournaments just because his role is a little bit iffy. Rick Carlisle has not been extremely reliable when it comes to giving Dennis Smith Jr. minutes. If JJ Barea comes in off the bench and he's lighting up the floor, Dennis Smith Jr. could see limited minutes. So, again, best reserved here for tournaments, but at 4,800 on DraftKings and 5,100 on FanDuel, it's not a terrible spot here for him tonight. Obviously, we need to monitor the news on Wesley Matthews. He's probable with that foot. I want to make sure that he's going to play a full workload. Obviously, the game against Oklahoma City, a little bit of a blowout. That probably led to him playing a few less minutes. But Wesley Matthews, 4,100 on DraftKings, 4,800 on FanDuel. I like Wesley Matthews in this spot. Charlotte ranks 24th in defensive efficiency this season, allowing them to shoot 45.7% from the floor, 38% from three. He's just simply too cheap. And in a good matchup, I have a lot of interest in Wesley Matthews in this spot. Again, just monitor the news to make sure he's not going to be on a minutes limit or anything like that. I currently have him at 31 minutes in the projections. Harrison Barnes continues to be a really strong cash game option. Gonna play 33 to 35 minutes on a nightly basis. Take double-digit shots. Charlotte not great against opposing small forwards. Barnes continues to be underpriced, 5,800 on DraftKings, 5,900 on FanDuel for his role. I did mention Luka Doncic has been on fire of late, averaging 40.9 fantasy points, 23.2 points, 5.7 assists, 5.7 rebounds, 42.2% from three, and 45% from the floor. I put in the notes Charlotte has struggled to defend power forwards because he does start technically at the power forward position. That is kind of his position. I know Harrison Barnes does slide down there a little bit, but Luka Doncic, for all intents and purposes, kind of the power forward in this offense, even though the sites refuse to give him eligibility there. Really, really strong cash and tournament option here tonight. With Cody Zeller being out, probably going to see Willie Hernangomez get the start. And DeAndre Jordan, very, very interesting in the spot if Willie Hernangomez is going to be the starting center. Charlotte's already struggling against big men, giving up 46.3 rebounds, 13.8 second chance points. That makes DeAndre Jordan one of my favorite cash and GPP center options on the board. I don't think he's going to be very popular, but at 6,500 on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel, really, really strong option here tonight. Lots of rebounding and scoring upside down low. So he's someone that I do have a significant amount of interest in here. Looking at the Charlotte side of things, with Lamb and Zeller being out, Kemba Walker averages 1.28 fantasy points per minute with a 33.5% usage rate. Kemba Walker averaging 31.2 points on 56.6% shooting over his last 5 games. This is a really, really, really good spot here for Kemba Walker, who comes in at 9K on DraftKings, 9,400 on FanDuel. Gonna be a guy that I'm trying to force in my lineups. Dallas does rank 12th in fantasy points allowed to point guards this season, and they're just a league average defense as far as point guards go. He's taking about 70% of his shots either at the rim or on above the break threes. Dallas allowing 66% shooting on at the rim and 36.2% on above the break threes. Kemba Walker, fantastic option here tonight. You're going to get Tony Parker, you're going to get Devontae Graham, and you're going to get Malik Monk getting extended minutes here. All three perfectly fine options here. Malik Monk is going to be the chalky option of the night, I think, especially as value goes. Did see 24 minutes against Orlando. Put up a really strong outing, 21 points, 4 assists. It is a perfectly fine spot here for Malik Monk. But I think in tournaments, you kind of want to pivot to Devontae Graham. Head coach James Borrego is going to start Devontae Graham. He has been talking up Devontae Graham. They love Devontae Graham. Devontae Graham, 3,400 on DraftKings, 3,900 on FanDuel. Very, very strong option here. The last couple of games for him have been really, really good. I have a lot of interest in Devontae Graham as a pivot off of Malik Monk. 30% of his shots come at the rim, with another 50% of his shots coming from three. And those two areas, as I highlighted already, Dallas really struggling to defend. You can sprinkle Michael Kidd-Gilchrist and Marvin Williams into tournaments. That's fine. Willie Hernan-Gomez, a very, very strong cash and tournament value. Despite the tough matchup, Willie Hernan-Gomez, 3,800 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel. Not as good of a play over there. If you're playing on FanDuel, it would not be a bad idea to take a look at like Frank Kaminsky or Bismack Biyombo as pivots or as drop score options here. Both guys really, really cheap. They're both minimum salary on both sites. So even on DraftKings, if you're building 150 lineups, you might want to sprinkle some of those guys into your player pool. Moving on, New Orleans Pelicans at Brooklyn Nets. This was a pick'em with a 230.5 over under. Anthony Davis is probable for this game. Nikola Mirotic is out. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is out, and Alan Crabb is out. A little surprising to see this game being a pick'em with Brooklyn being shorthanded, but it's definitely interesting there. Look, the entire community got spurned by Anthony Davis last game. I get it. It's frustrating. Everyone likes to meme, Anthony Davis misses so much time. Anthony Davis always screws me, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? He doesn't actually miss that much time, and he doesn't actually screw you as often as you think. Anthony Davis is going to absolutely feast here against Brooklyn, and I think it would be dumb to overlook him in the spot because he burned everyone last game, and you have some misconception that he misses all this freaking time and always burns you, and you never profit off of Anthony Davis having monster upside and putting up monster games. He's averaging 65.4 fantasy points on 31.6 points, 16.6 rebounds, 52% shooting over his last 5 games. Brooklyn has been pounded by opposing centers this season. Anthony Davis, 11-8 on DraftKings, 12-7 on FanDuel. It's a smash spot here for him, and yeah, I don't have any interest in fading him here tonight. Julius Randle is a perfectly fine pivot off of Anthony Davis. Again, it is a really, really strong spot. Brooklyn has ranked 13th in defensive efficiency to power forwards this season. Without Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, that could actually come down. So I do expect them to struggle a little bit without Rondae here. Randle averaging 13.2 points in the paint this season. Brooklyn allowing 50.6 points in the paint to opponents. Absolute smash spot here for Julius Randle at 8K on DraftKings and 8,500 on FanDuel. Julius Randle has been really, really strong, solid over the last 3 games. Obviously, good spot for him. Brooklyn is pretty strong against opposing guards. They rank 11th in defensive efficiency to point guards, 8th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards. That obviously does hurt Jrue Holiday and Elfrid Payton a little bit, but Jrue Holiday, 8,300 on DraftKings, 8,600 on FanDuel. Still one of your better cash game options. I read somewhere today that Jrue Holiday is not shooting as much lately. I don't know where they're getting that from, because Jrue Holiday is still double-digit field goal attempts in all of these games. So, yeah, I don't know where they're getting that Jrue Holiday is not shooting as much lately, but you do you. 32% of his field goals attempts come in the paint or mid-range. Brooklyn allowing about 43% field goal percentage in both those areas this season. Elfrid Payton, I still expect him to be slightly limited, but he's a fine tournament option. 5,300 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. And then Etuan Moore, Darius Miller, just guys that are tournament values here tonight. I do have a lot of interest in both Spencer Dinwiddie and D'Angelo Russell here tonight. Both guys similarly priced across the industry. D'Angelo Russell, 7K on DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel. Spencer Dinwiddie, 7,200 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. Pelicans, 24th in defensive efficiency to opposing backcourts this season. Dinwiddie has been the guy that's been a little bit more reliable than D'Angelo Russell. In the month of December, Dinwiddie averaged 20 points on 46.6% shooting to go along with 2.5 rebounds and 6 assists. Russell, 17.9 points per game, 44% shooting, 3.5 rebounds, and 6.8 assists over that same span. Obviously, both guys very, very strong options. I'm going to lean towards Dinwiddie and Cash again because he has been a little bit more consistent. And then D'Angelo Russell, and when he gets hot, Kenny Atkinson continues to roll with Dinwiddie over Russell, but Russell in tournaments is a perfectly fine option here. Dinwiddie also worth noting, and again, some of this is based on the sample of him being off the bench, but without LeVert, Crabbe, and Rondé on the floor, Spencer Dinwiddie, 33.4% usage rate, 1.21 fantasy points per minute. That again makes Spencer Dinwiddie a pretty strong option here. Obviously coming off a couple of down games, has shot the ball pretty poorly recently, but we know he has upside, especially in a matchup like this. Outside of Spencer Dinwiddie, there are some other places to look. Joe Harris continues to be a strong mid-range option. Could have a good night. Pelicans struggling to defend the three-point line. He has top 20 fantasy points in 9 of his last 10. Joe Harris, 4,900 on DraftKings. 4,800 on FanDuel. Very, very strong cash game play just because of the consistency that he has shown of late. Rodions Kurucs has struggled over the last couple of games. 5,200 on DraftKings and 4,800 on FanDuel. Very strong cash and tournament option here. Playing a few less minutes in these last two games. I don't expect that to continue. This is a pretty good spot here for him. The Pelicans 30th in defensive efficiency to small forwards this season. DeMarre Carroll without Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, gonna see some extra minutes here as topped 30 minutes in back-to-back games. Obviously, Ed Davis was out the last game for rest. That obviously led to DeMarre Carroll getting a few extra minutes, but I still have him projected here for 28 minutes, and this is a really good spot for him. He has notched 30-plus fantasy points in the last two. And he takes a lot of shots from the corners. 17% of his shots are corner threes. Pelicans allowing 41.2% on corner threes this season. DeMarre Carroll, 4K on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. Gonna be the way that I get some cheap exposure to this game here tonight. Jared Dudley, Ed Davis, excellent values here. I do expect Jarrett Allen to struggle a little bit, which could lead to Ed Davis and, again, Jared Dudley getting a couple extra minutes here. Ed Davis, 3,400 on DraftKings, should suit up for this game, play maybe 21, could see a few extra minutes here in a matchup that he has produced pretty solid numbers in already this season. Don't chase Theo Pinson. Shabazz Napier, I guess, is in play over on FanDuel at 3,500, but again, don't chase Theo Pinson. Kenneth Faried in this spot. They only got run because Russell and Ed Davis rested last game. Moving on, Detroit, Memphis. This game going to be pretty quick to talk about. Memphis, 4-point favorites in this one, 299 over under. Kyle Anderson has scored in double figures in 6 of his last 7 games, shooting 70.4% from the floor in that stretch. JaMychal Green shot 54% in December. And Langston Galloway really struggling, 2 of 20 from the floor, 0 of 11 from three-point range over the last 3 games. I don't really have interest in anyone from Detroit. You could talk me into Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond as like large field 5% exposure and 150 lineup options. It is worth noting that Blake Griffin, one of the beat writers actually noted that it would not shock him if Blake Griffin rested this game. If that happened, that might open up someone like John Lure or something like that. I'll cover that later on if it happens. Again, it's just not a spot where I really care to have a lot of exposure here. Reggie Bullock could see a little bit of a boost. Memphis allowing 40% shooting on corner threes. We know Reggie Bullock, a guy that does shoot a decent amount of corner threes, but it's not a spot where I want to go tonight. Like, there's just so many better places to look. You can look at the Memphis side of this game. It is a little bit of a better spot here for several of these guys. That starts with Mike Conley and Marc Gasol. Both guys, very strong cash and tournament options. Mike Conley, 7,700 on DraftKings, 8,700 on FanDuel, not as appealing there, but continues to play a ton of minutes, take a lot of shots, and Detroit really struggling to defend the rim. Conley takes 25% of his shots at the rim, and they rank 27th in defensive efficiency to point guards. I definitely don't hate getting some exposure to Mike Conley in cash and tournaments here, and then Marc Gasol as well. 48% of his shots come at the rim or in the paint. Detroit struggling to defend in those areas. We know they also do struggle to defend big men. They're giving up 24.4 points, 14 rebounds per game to opposing big men. You can look at Garrett Temple, JaMychal Green, decent values here. JaMychal Green, 4,700 on DraftKings, 4K on FanDuel. Garrett Temple, 37 on DraftKings, 38 on FanDuel. And then Kyle Anderson, always just a guy in cash. I did note, again, Detroit really struggling to defend the rim, 67.9% shooting allowed at the rim. Kyle Anderson, 57% of his shots come at the rim. He's still perfectly fine in cash, especially at his $5,100 price tag on FanDuel or on DraftKings. Moving on, Orlando at Charlotte. This game, somewhat more appealing, but lots of injuries to talk about in this one. Orlando at Chicago, sorry. Chicago 1.5 point favorites in this one, 201.5 over under. Nikola Vucevic is questionable. Jonathan Simmons is doubtful. DJ Augustin is questionable. Robin Lopez is questionable. Timofey Mozgov and Bobby Portis remain out. DJ Augustin sat out Monday after averaging 23.3 points, 6.7 assists over the 3 previous games. He said he expects to play in this one against the Bulls. I have a lot of interest in Orlando. If Vucevic plays, very, very strong option in this spot. Obviously, we know he leads the team in usage. We know Chicago really struggles against opposing big men, and Vucevic has torched them already twice this season. Chicago ranking 28th in defensive efficiency against the position. Vucevic, 9,400 on DraftKings, 9,800 on FanDuel, has averaged 54 fantasy points in 2 outings against Chicago already this season. We know he has monster upside. He's pretty darn reliable as well. Mo Bamba would be a guy to consider if Vucevic misses this game. If Vucevic misses, Terrence Ross and DJ Augustin do see decent boosts. Terrence Ross, a 5.7% usage rate boost. DJ Augustin, a 7% usage boost without Vucevic on the floor. I like DJ Augustin regardless of the news on Vucevic. He comes in at 4,300 on DraftKings, 5K on FanDuel. He's been, like I said, he's been really good recently. Continues to be most nights going to be one of my favorite cash game options because outside of a couple of down games, he's just really, really, really consistently getting you 20 plus fantasy points. It is a good matchup. Chicago does struggle to defend point guards, ranking 26th in defensive efficiency. Terrence Ross has struggled against the Bulls, but has topped 20 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4, continues to take a lot of shots, could see a few extra minutes with Jonathan Simmons being out or doubtful in this game. I do have interest in Terrence Ross as a value play, 4,200 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon, perfectly fine in tournaments. I don't really like the matchup or the spot for either one of them unless Vucevic or Augustin sits. And if DJ Augustin misses this game, Jerian Grant, revenge game, Jerian Grant would be an interesting option here. You could even talk me into using him on someone on FanDuel where he's 3,600 because he did torch Chicago in one of the games, but I think he just played limited minutes against them. Again, revenge game. On the Chicago side of things, it's pretty straightforward, night in and night out. Chris Dunn has been really consistent, but relies heavily on stuffing the stat sheet. Orlando's point guard defense, they rank 10th in defensive efficiency. Dunn has hoisted double-digit field goal attempts in 6 straight outings. Obviously, you can consider him in tournaments. He does have triple-double upside. 6,400 on DraftKings is just not terribly appealing for the type of player he is, especially in cash. Again, in tournaments, it's perfectly fine. 7,800 on FanDuel, that's just ridiculous. Zach LaVine, very, very interesting on DraftKings, 6,600. 27% usage rate since returning from injury. Still taking a ton of shots, still has upside. I know the Toronto game was terrible, but still has upside in the spots against Orlando. And that $6,600 price tag on DraftKings, very, very appealing. 7,600 on FanDuel, more of just a tournament option here tonight. Justin Holiday, perfectly fine, still in cash in tournaments. I realize the shooting has not really been there for him of late, but at 4,800 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel, did shoot a little bit better recently, has played really well against Orlando the last few games. 4,800 for a guy playing this many freaking minutes is just insanely cheap. Orlando does struggle against opposing small forwards, allowing him to shoot 38.7% from three. 7 of his last 10 games, he's put up double-digit field goal attempts. He's still taking decent shots. He's actually been pretty good on the boards as well. I have a lot of interest in Justin Holiday as a mid-range cash and tournament option here tonight. Orlando ranks 19th in defensive efficiency to power forwards this season, allowing him to shoot 47.2% from the floor, 36.4% from three. Lauri Markkanen has been shooting the ball pretty well over the last 5 games, 45% from the floor, 40.7% from three, playing a lot of minutes. Very, very strong option here tonight. I do like Lauri Markkanen. Yeah, it's just a good spot for him. Wendell Carter, decent mid-range tournament option. Unfortunately, his minutes very insecure at times. Has played 33 and 33 in the last 2, but we do have a very large sample of his minutes being in the mid-20s, low 20s, him getting in foul trouble, especially if Vucevic plays. Wendell Carter Jr. could be in trouble, which could lead to Robin Lopez, 3,400 on DraftKings, 3,600 on FanDuel, being a pretty strong play. Last time against Orlando, 23 minutes, 24 fantasy points. I'll take that all day long at 3,400. Outside of that, not really anyone else to talk about there. Moving on, Minnesota at Boston, another game where it's kind of tough to break things down because of injuries. But we just have 3 games left. Boston, 6-point favorites in this one, 218.5 over under. We have Jeff Teague being questionable, Derrick Rose being doubtful, Kyrie Irving being questionable, Robert Covington being questionable, and Big Rob Williams being out for this game. Also, Aaron Baines is out. Karl-Anthony Towns averaging 28.3 points, 18.5 rebounds over his last 4 games. I do like Karl-Anthony Towns in cash and in tournaments, regardless of the rest of the news with Jeff Teague. Towns, 30.6% usage rate without Butler and Rose on the floor, along with 1.54 fantasy points per minute. 34% usage rate and 1.71 fantasy points per minute when you take Teague and Rose and Butler off the floor. Obviously, numbers without Teague and Rose are better than the numbers with Teague on the floor. That being said, 31% usage, 1.54 fantasy points per minute. That's still pretty darn solid in this matchup. Boston ranks 22nd in defensive efficiency, the centers over the last 10 games, giving up 25.3 points, 16.3 rebounds, 53% shooting. They've really struggled to defend opposing big men without Aaron Baines. I love Karl-Anthony Towns in all formats. The upside is still so ridiculously high here for him. Just look at these last 3 games, the minutes, the production. It's a really, really good spot here for Karl-Anthony Towns. So I have a lot of interest in him in all formats. I would expect Jeff Teague to be extremely limited if he returns. That's going to take a lot of the value away from Tyus Jones, who honestly at 5,600 on DraftKings, 6,300 on FanDuel wasn't that appealing in the first place. That being said, if Jeff Teague misses, you can still use him. He has been really strong over the last couple of games, playing a lot of minutes. So yeah, it's just not a spot where it's just not terribly appealing. Just at that price tag, we know Tyus Jones also has a really low floor. But if we're without Robert Covington and we're without Jeff Teague and we're without Derrick Rose, it would be hard to imagine Tyus Jones not playing 38, 40 minutes. So that would also open up things for Josh Okogie, who would be a pretty strong value play. Again, that's mostly if Jeff Teague and Robert Covington are out. Andrew Wiggins, 27.7% usage rate without Rose and Butler, 29.2% usage rate without Teague, Rose, and Butler. Andrew Wiggins, 6,200 on DraftKings, 6,400 on FanDuel, is perfectly fine as a tournament option. same thing is going to be just about every single night. He's still going to play a lot of minutes, still take a lot of shots, but obviously not the greatest of matchups. Robert Covington, cash tournaments if he plays. If Covington misses, we could maybe see a couple extra minutes for Dario Saric and Taj Gibson, just as the rotation gets shortened a little bit. They could be sprinkled in as value options as well. Just need to monitor the news on that one. On the Boston side of things, the status of Kyrie Irving and Robert Covington is really, really important here. I've highlighted it countless times already this season, but with Robert Covington being on the Timberwolves, they use him to defend opposing power forward or opposing point guards most nights. He's really, really good at doing that. He's doing a good job of limiting opposing point guard production. That being said, Kyrie Irving, 8,800 on DraftKings, 9K on FanDuel. Still a tough fade given how ridiculously good he has been of late, averaging 46.1 fantasy points on 24.2 points, 7.7 assists, 5.7 rebounds, and 43% field goal, 3-point shooting over his last 5 games. Coming off a down game against San Antonio where he played 29 minutes, still put up 35 fantasy points. There's also a little bit of blowout risk. I like Kemba Walker as a pivot off of Kyrie Irving in the spot, but if Robert Covington sits, Kyrie Irving would be a tough fade if he was able to play, dealing with a scratched cornea. If Kyrie sits, Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart, obviously sliding into more minutes. Unfortunately, Terry Rozier, $5,300 on DraftKings, $4,300 on FanDuel. They might have overreacted to that news just a little bit. Terry Rozier, if Robert Covington misses and Kyrie Irving misses, would still be a tough fade at just 5,300. Average is just shy of a fantasy point per minute without Irving this season. Jaylen Brown would see a pretty strong boost if Kyrie Irving is out. He could still be used in tournaments even if Kyrie Irving plays. He is 4,900 on DraftKings and 4,500 on FanDuel. Minnesota ranking 18th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards. He does have a 25% use rate without Irving this season. I've been targeting the Wolves with small forwards for a while now because of the defensive assignments that they use. They rank 28th in defensive efficiency to the position. Jason Tatum, 32% of his field goal attempts are coming from beyond the arc. Minnesota allowing small forwards to shoot 40.7% from 3. I love Jason Tatum regardless of Kyrie Irving's status. Jason Tatum at 6,300 on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel. A very strong cash and tournament option here. He's just been really, really good for the majority of the season. I know he has a couple of down games where he kind of let everyone down, especially against Houston, but still taking a ton of shots, has rebounding upside in this spot as well. Going to get you 30-plus fantasy points most nights. Marcus Morris, 26.6% usage rate, averaging 1.14 fantasy points per minute without Irving. Would make him a fantastic option if Irving does not play, but at 6K on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel, I like him regardless. This is still a really good spot here for him tonight. Minnesota, 20th in defensive efficiency to power forwards on the season, allowing him to shoot 46.2% from the floor, 39.1% from 3. Morris, shooting 44.1% from 3 this season. Still really, really consistently getting you a really solid return on his salary on a nightly basis. Outside of that, not really anyone else to talk about. You can use Gordon Hayward in tournaments if you want as a value off the bench. Would maybe see a couple extra minutes if Kyrie Irving is out. And Al Horford, I just don't really want to go there tonight. Moving on, Philly, Phoenix. Philly, only 5-point favorites in this one, 228.5 over under. I am under the assumption that Vegas thinks Joel Embiid rests this game. He obviously returned last game after missing a game with knee soreness. I would not be shocked if Philly rested him here. It's something we definitely need to keep an eye on and something that we definitely need to consider when we're building our lineups tonight. Devin Booker on the Phoenix side has been really strong, has strung together 9 straight 20-point outings, averaging 28.4 points per game over that span. JJ Redick has made at least 4 3-pointers in 4 of his past 5 games and is 20 of 39 during that stretch. Looking at the Philly side of things, obviously if Joel Embiid plays. Joel Embiid 10-6 on DraftKings, 11K on FanDuel. A very, very good option here. Monster upside, 60 plus fantasy points in 3 straight games, 60 fantasy over 60 fantasy points against Phoenix last time out. Phoenix really, really bad against centers. 46 rebounds, 14.2 second chance points, and 53 points in the paint allowed. Again, it's just a matter of if he plays. It's something we definitely need to at least keep an eye on. Ben Simmons, phenomenal spot here tonight. Suns 24th in defensive efficiency to point guards on the season, allowing opponents to shoot 66% at the rim. Ben Simmons takes 69. Very nice. Percent of his shots at the rim. Ben Simmons 8,900 on DraftKings, 9,500 on FanDuel. Coming off two poor games, fell just shy of a triple double. Again, we know he has triple double upside. It's a spot where I love Ben Simmons, regardless of Joel Embiid's status here tonight. I think he could come close to notching a triple double like he did the last time these teams played. JJ Redick, always a strong cash game option. Would get a usage boost without Joel Embiid. He averages 31.5% usage and 1.02 fantasy points per minute without Joel Embiid on the floor. But at 5,300 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel, I still like him in cash. Again, most nights he's going to get you mid-30s in minutes, mid-20s with upside as far as fantasy production goes. 26.5 fantasy points against Phoenix last time out. TJ McConnell, a perfectly fine value in the spot, 3,600 on DraftKings, 4,300 on FanDuel, continues to play a decent amount of minutes. Really strong matchup here for him tonight. I would project him for mid-20s in minutes here tonight. And that's really, really appealing in a matchup against a Suns team that can't really defend anybody. Jimmy Butler, simply too cheap to overlook in GPPs, 8% usage boost without Embiid. Again, monitor the news for that. And then Wilson Chandler, a strong value here tonight. You can also look at Mike Muscala, who would come off the bench if Embiid misses, and would be a strong value option here at 3,700 against the Suns. Looking at the Phoenix side of things, really only 3 options that I have my eye on for the most part. Devin Booker scored 20 plus real points in 9 straight games, top 30 real points in 3 of those. Phillies really struggled to defend primary ball handlers. Phoenix, obviously, Booker is Phoenix's, for all intents and purposes, their point guard. Philly ranks 21st in defensive efficiency to point guards this season, allowing 25.5 points, 5.6 rebounds, 8.5 assists, and 43% shooting to the position. I love Devin Booker in this spot. He is just 8,300 on DraftKings, 8,600 on FanDuel. I mentioned a very high upside pivot off of Bradley Beal, and that would be Devin Booker, who's going to take a lot of shots, who's going to put up a pretty solid game here. Actually had a good game against Philly last time out, 37 points, 8 rebounds, or 8 assists. It's a really, really good spot here for Devin Booker. I like him a significant amount. Outside of Booker, TJ Warren, really, really good GPP option here. Philly ranks 24th in defensive efficiency to power forwards, allowing him to shoot 48.3% from the floor this season. He's top 20 points in 3 of his last 4. Continues to be a volume guy, continues to play a lot of minutes. But at 6,600 on DraftKings, 7,100 on FanDuel. I also saw somewhere today where someone was like, fade TJ Warren because he has a really low floor and doesn't really do much of anything. TJ Warren, pretty high upside play in this spot. Had a good game against Philly last time out. You could look at McCall Bridges. You could look at Kelly Oubre if you want. Bridges continues to play a decent amount of minutes. Kelly Oubre, just an upside option off the bench. I don't really have a lot of interest in Melton. I don't have interest in Ayton if Joel Embiid plays, but if Joel Embiid sits, DeAndre Ayton would be a really, really tough fade. 7,300 on DraftKings, 7,900 on FanDuel. And then Rashawn Holmes could be a guy that you could look at as value. Again, it mostly just matters. We still need to see if they even list Joel Embiid as questionable for this game. We'll know that here later this afternoon. Looking at the last game of the night, OKC at Lakers. OKC 4.5 point favorites in this one, 229 over under. Alex Abrinas is out. LeBron James is out. Michael Beasley is out, and Rajon Rondo is out for this game. Paul George topped 20 points in each of his last 11 games, including 7 efforts of more than 30. And a little bit of a narrative streak game, I guess, for Paul George. Obviously, the team that he spurned in the offseason hometown game. It's worth noting here, he has cooled off a little bit over the last 2 games. Still one of the hottest players in the NBA of late. 28.2% usage rate on the season. That's just 1.7% below Russell Westbrook for the entire season. Paul George, 9,200 on DraftKings, 10K on FanDuel. I love this spot for him. Great cash and tournament play here tonight. It doesn't matter if you can afford him. It's kind of tough to get him in with some of the other really, really strong options, but we know most nights he's going to get mid-40s in fantasy points, have 50-plus fantasy point upside, so I like him a lot. Russell Westbrook, it's Russell Westbrook. He's obviously going to have a good game here, has good games just about every single night, has monster upside. It is worth noting, Lakers really strong rim protection team. Lonzo Ball, a pretty good defender. Lakers perimeter defense is actually pretty strong. I don't dislike Russell Westbrook in the spot. I'm just going to be paying for Anthony Davis, so Russell Westbrook probably going to be very overlooked. Would be a great tournament option here tonight. Steven Adams continues to be a great cash game option. Dream matchup against the Lakers. They rank 4th in fantasy points allowed to centers, giving up 46 rebounds per game, a lot of points in the paint. Steven Adams, 6,900 on DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel. Very, 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 very good option here tonight. So is Jeremy Grant, 5,300 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel. And then Dennis Schroeder, 5,400 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. Pretty strong option here. Gonna play upper 20s in minutes. Obviously, with Alex Abrinas being out, is coming off a down game against Dallas, but he's just taking a lot of shots and he's still playing a lot of minutes. He just has to hit those shots. He didn't do it last game, but I'd say 28, 30 fantasy points is a reasonable expectation here for Dennis Schroeder. So I have some interest in him, especially in tournaments. On the Lakers side of things, it's really not that appealing of a spot outside of a couple options. Kyle Kuzma is perfectly fine in cash and tournaments. 31.5% usage rate, 1.17 fantasy points per minute. Might draw some Paul George defense, but he's still perfectly fine. It's not a smash spot for anybody. No one projects to be a really, really strong option. It is what it is. It's a tough matchup for a lot of these guys. Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball can be used in tournaments. Lonzo Ball, obviously, triple-double upside, but at 7,200 against Oklahoma City, really, really tough to imagine him paying off that salary. 6,500 on FanDuel, a little bit more appealing. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is really the only guy that I do kind of want to take a look at. 3,900 on DraftKings, 3,800 on FanDuel. Still going to play mid to upper 20s in minutes, and he kind of strikes me as the same kind of guy as like Iman Shumpert, who has torched the Thunder this season. Kind of a guy who takes most of his shots from the perimeter, can get you some rebounds and assists or steals and things like that. I don't hate taking a shot on him, especially on FanDuel where you can drop his score. But other than that, it's just really not an appealing spot here for the Lakers. But that's going to do it. That's all 9 games. I will be back on Friday. We only have 3 games tomorrow, so not going to do a pod for tomorrow's slate. But again, I will be back on Friday, and good luck in all your contests tonight.